Murphy's Law states that anything that can go wrong will. Oh, man, is that ever true? I was 11 the first time my parents left me home alone, and it couldn't have gone more wrong, short of me dying. My siblings, all in their teens, were off with their friends, and my folks had made plans with my would-be godparents. It was never made official or anything, but if anything had happened to my parents, it would have been the stewards who would have taken care of me. My parents picked up a frozen pizza and let me rent a movie, Dennis the Menace. It was about a well-meaning but mischievous kid who ends up protecting his hometown from a dangerous thief, a concept that would hit a little closer to home than I would have liked. It was about midway through the movie as I sat on the floor of the basement, happily chomping away on a cheese pizza with dipping sauce, when I heard it. The sound of footsteps on the floor above me. It's just my imagination, I told myself, knowing that no one was supposed to be home for hours. But I heard it again. This time there was no mistaking it. Someone was in the house. I listened as the footsteps walked around the floor above me, and then went quiet. There's a fine line between being brave and being stupid, and looking back, what I did next was nowhere close to brave. Instead of running out the back door and going to my friend Tom's house, which was just 3 doors down, I went upstairs. Right near the door to the basement was one of my parents' many, many bookshelves. But what made this one particularly important to me at the moment was that on the top of the shelf was a sheathed knife from an African bushman. I opened the basement door slowly so as not to let it creak. And then I crept up on all fours and sidled up close against the wall. I sat for a moment listening for the intruder, but all I could hear was my own heart pounding in my chest, so hard I could feel the pulse in my ears. I counted to 5, and I ran to the bookshelf. I jumped on the couch next to it and scaled the bookshelf as if I were climbing a wall on an obstacle course. My fingers found the knife, and I yanked it from the sheath as I dropped to the ground, waiting for something, anything that might happen next. But the house was quiet. I called out. Hello? If you're still here, I've already called the cops. Nothing. Not a peep, except for the dull ticking of the mantel clock. The house, it seemed, was once again empty. I took the knife with me and went downstairs. I'd lost my appetite and was too frazzled to pay attention to Walter Matthau play grumpy old Mr. Wilson, the object of most of Dennis's antics. I sat down on the couch when I saw movement by the backyard. A shape as large as my own father loomed in the shadows, steadily approaching the back door. My hand snapped to the blade as I stood up. A hand reached out and knocked on the glass. I jumped and hid the knife behind my leg, my arm hanging casually to the side. I moved a little farther from bravery and walked toward the back door. In the light, I could see the uniform and badge of the police officer standing outside the door. Being an aficionado of crime stories, I knew that the uniform did not an officer make. Criminals often dressed up in different uniforms to fool honest regular folk like myself. That included police uniforms. "Are you home alone?" the man in the uniform asked.
Home alone? What, I look like an idiot to this guy? Like I was gonna tell a stranger that.
I shook my head no. "Is your sister home with you?"
My sister? How did this guy know about my older sister? Had he been watching the house?
My expert research from TV and cartoons taught me that criminals were always casing the joint for days before they pulled their heist. "Yeah," I said. "She's upstairs." "Okay," the man said. "There's been a robbery next door. You stay inside until your folks get home, okay?" I told him I would and watched him go. The moment he was out of sight, I dashed up the stairs. Blue and red flashing lights poured in through the living room window. There were indeed cop cars around my neighbor's house across the street. The man from the backyard appeared and went over to another officer and began talking with him.
I guess he was a cop.
I thought. It turned out my neighbors had been robbed while I was home alone, but they hadn't come into my house. See, I had left the side door to the garage wide open after mowing the lawn that day. Something I did a lot, and my dad was always asked me about it. And since the robbery had been recent, the police had reason to believe that the thief, or thieves as it eventually turned out to be, might have run in there. It was the police walking through the house, not the robbers. That didn't make my reaction any less dumb than it was. I was 11. What was I going to do with a knife against a desperate and possibly armed criminal, except give them a knife with which they could stab me? I was lucky I didn't get myself killed. And even if it was the police, they could have mistaken me for a criminal, and with a knife in my hand I could have gotten myself shot. I wish I could say that was the dumbest thing I've ever done. But it wasn't. Not by a long shot. But you know what? I never left the side door open again after that. Not once.